Now, okay, we are now live. Just fetching the video stream. Welcome everybody to the very first SwansCast live episode of the year. It is in, I would say, unfortunately not great circumstances. We didn't play very well on Thursday night, and that's essentially what has led to us doing a SwansCast live. Ideally, we would not have wanted to do one until much later in the season, such as like the bye, when we usually do a bit of a bye review, take some questions from our listeners and whatnot. But with me today is Joshua Marr, SwansCast regular, and we basically came up with the idea of doing a SwansCast live after we talked quite a bit on Facebook yesterday and on Thursday night. So, Joshua, did you happen to catch the match on Thursday night?
Oh, I caught it on Thursday night, and then I rewatched it on Friday morning, and it was ugly both times. It was worse the second time around than it was the first time.
Yeah, I watched it the first time, and I honestly couldn't stomach watching it again. It was a little bit of torture, unfortunately. The first sort of quarter and a half was actually really good, but the amazing thing was we had 22 scoring shots, or at least 22 shots on goal in the first half alone. Now, I can't recall us ever having 22 shots on goal in a game in one half, really ever, except for maybe those games when we've absolutely thumped Fremantle and I think Carlton a few years back. But for only 8 goals, Josh, 8 goals from 22 shots, that is extremely poor.
The conversion rate wasn't good either, and you sort of, when we do those things, you sort of get this feeling in advance that it's going to come back and bite you at some stage. And not putting that dominance we had through the first quarter and almost a half time, not putting that on the scoreboard, really left them the opportunity and I guess the knowledge that they could bring us down. You know, that there would be no issues with them. If they got on their skateboard, they would be able to catch up with us in no short order. And they came out breathing fire. And, you know, we said in the preview podcast that you couldn't give them enough space. You'd only had to see what they did in the second quarter against Essendon the week before, that they would run all over the top of you from the centre. And that's exactly what happened. But skills, execution and stuff aside, there's only sort of two things that really came home to me this week. And one is how the 666 rule has impacted on us. We were one of the teams that was tipped to suffer the most as a result of the 666 rule. And the other one is the lack of leg speed, particularly in our midfield, is now really exposed by the quick clearances.
Yeah, it really is. And like the 666 has hurt us. We kind of thought that would actually happen anyway, because we do have an undersized defence, and we've had an undersized defence for, well, many years really, since like 2010, 2011. Ted Richards and Heath Grundy, they've never been particularly big players, but they've always been quite good players, and Ted Richards was one of our best centre-half backs that we've had for quite some time. Fast forward now, we've got Dane Rampy, who's 189, Alia, who's 194 and about 80 or 90 kilos. Tom McCartan, who's 193 or so, and he's only about 80 odd kilos. He's in his second year, and he's only just turned 19 as well. Callum Mills, 187 or so he's a smallish defender. We are missing Nick Smith. We are missing Heath Grundy. We are missing Jared McVeigh, and we're missing almost 900 games of experience in the back line. And I would say it would be an easy excuse or an easy cop-out to say, look, defence, they were the reason why we lost, missing all those games of experience. But, Josh, I don't think it was the defence's fault on Thursday night. I think the blame lies wholly in other departments, not only on the ground, but also off the ground and outside of the immediate visual eye. What do you think about that?
I think it would be overly simplistic just to say that the back six are largely at fault for the way Melbourne were able to score. And I know that's the opinion of some people, but if you just look at, you know, the actual players we had in our back six the other night, you know, look at how much they've played in the last 12 months. You know, Thurlow's played 2 games for us. He played mostly VFL last year, and he was in rehab for his knee the year before. Tommy McCartan, who was playing centre-half back for the
second game
for the year, second time in his career at that position.
Yep.
and he's played under 20 games. Rampy busted his butt all night, and Johnny Longmire admitted that in the press conference that when it comes to effort, that he was probably a good example of what what the rest of the team should aspire to do. There's just not a lot, there's just not a lot of experience down there at the moment.
Yeah, and look,
I think we played like that. We had an inexperienced backline.
And the effort thing is certainly something that needs to be discussed because John Longmire has long said that we've lacked effort, or we've certainly had effort issues in the past throughout the season, really, apart from the Carlton game. He's lamented drop-offs in work rate, pressure, basically just basic football across the ground. And we really, really struggled after half-time. The players just stopped running. I don't know why they're lacking so much effort, and it just seems they switch off. In 3 of the 4 games so far this season, they just switched off.
It's funny, isn't it? So if you go back in time, go back to the 2014 grand final, and I remember John sitting in the post-match after that, and he was asked by one of the reporters that, basically said that was a very un-Sydney-like performance, and no one could really put it down to why, we didn't give ourselves a chance, I think was the way he put it. And then you fast forward to the semi-final against Geelong in 2017, where we got absolutely demolished. And Rowan Connolly actually said that there was no real reason as to why Sydney, and he was specifically talking about us, would have these drop-offs in effort or performance. Now, since the year of the 06 start, in my opinion, those drop-offs have become more regular.
Yeah.
It used to be for a quarter. Now it's for 2 quarters or 3 in some games, and it's becoming a recurring issue. Whenever we've had issues of effort in the past, our club's always talked about its leaders and how its leaders need to stand up. So when I watch another post-game with John Longmire saying exactly the same stuff, you could almost put that press conference on repeat for every loss we've ever had.
Yeah,
and I
absolutely.
See Josh Kennedy... Yeah, and then I see Josh Kennedy saying the same stuff that we've all seen before. You sort of got to wonder where does the energy or where does the impetus for change come from to turn that particular thing around? Because I don't care about the rest of it at the moment. I just want to see.
It makes you wonder if it's a leadership issue. Yeah,
it's very un-Swans-like.
But the captains should be leading from the front, and we had this issue for the last 2 years with Josh Kennedy as a captain. I'm not blaming him, certainly. So don't take this as blame game Josh Kennedy, it's all his fault. But there was certainly an issue where the senior players, certainly in the last 2 to 2.5 years, have really dropped off. Now, I wonder if that is a combination of all the players that have been traded out or delisted or have retired. That some of these players that never really were tagged are now being hard tagged and clubs are putting in a lot of time and effort into them. Or if they literally have just hit their peak and they're falling off the edge of a cliff. Luke Parker, for one, he hasn't been the same since 2016, 2017, really. Hanbury, obviously, he's moved on.
And he's a guy who was second in the Brownlow, and he doesn't look anything like that part at the moment. In fact, I was actually looking up some stats on Harry Cunningham last night, and Harry Cunningham's ranked only 4 or 6 spots below Parker in the player rankings.
Yeah.
So you'd have to wonder why Parks has taken a bit of a fall from grace over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and I've always kind of thought maybe he's just getting tagged out of it, and there's clubs that are putting a lot of time and effort into nullifying him. But, look, I know some people are going to want us to talk more about Thursday than in general terms, but some things that we have to quickly mention, or at least discuss before we go really into Thursday, because I think people really want to know how we feel. And I know for certain, Josh, that I was feeling pretty dirty after the game. Were you feeling pretty dirty?
I was pretty dirty. I was more so dirty the next day because I watched it from a bar and I had a couple of frothies and I thought, that wasn't too bad off a 5-day turnaround. Melbourne showed a little bit more of what everyone's expected from them this year, but when I actually looked at it in the cold light of day the next day, it was just as bad as everyone said it was.
Yeah, it was really quite horrendous, that second half in particular. But some of the things that are affecting the off-field performance of the club, we have to keep this in mind. The coaching turnover, we've had a massive turnover in coaches in the last 2 years alone. Basically, all of our senior staff, except for Blakey and Longmire, have moved on. Kirk was brought in a couple of years ago, so he was one who's sort of gone away and come back. But everyone else is new. So Stevie J is in his second season. Dean Cox is in his second season from the Eagles. Jeremy Laidler's in his first season. Reece Shaw went to North Melbourne. I'm not even sure who else is in the other coaching positions. We've got a really, compared to some of the other clubs, we've got a really small coaching panel.
Lloyd Paris?
Yeah, Lloyd Paris. He's a former Swan Academy player who's now coaching the... I'm not even sure which team he's coaching now. But it's a very young, very inexperienced coaching squad itself. Then you look at what's actually happening with the club and the ground situation and the training situation. If you go on the Sydney Swans page, there's actual footage of Heaney training in the stairway at the SCG. And that just doesn't happen at any other club at all. You can look at Gold Coast were an absolute basket case 6 years ago. They had portable units that were running around a crappy track and they had no facilities whatsoever. I would rather us have those facilities 6 years ago that Gold Coast have than what we've got now. The gym is arguably the worst in the league. The facilities are easily the worst in the league. And they're still some time away off actually having decent training facilities. I know Tom Harley recently said they're in the works where they should be ready soon. But the situation with what's happened with Allianz, the SCG Trust, the state government, they've ripped down the stadium, they've dug up Moore Park, the players finally got to train at the SCG during the week and it didn't help them. But they've been training at the other side of the city and it's almost an hour away from their actual facilities. That's how extreme it has been. So it hasn't been a good situation off the field.
It's actually an unusual year. When we talk about these things offline and we sort of go, this isn't going well or that's not going well, and we actually try and look at everything that's going on in Sydney Swans land, there's a whole bunch of stuff this year which isn't going right. So, or is probably not as stable as it should, or would be. And when you start adding that into things like rule changes, and the inexperience of a large portion of our team now, it makes us look... we end up we end up looking ordinary. So if we look like a team who's rebuilding, I think that's exactly what we are at the moment. Maybe to some extent we should start pulling our expectations back a little bit for the next couple of years. Well,
I think also when it comes to sport, and I know you're quite passionate sports follower, you follow Australian and American sports, and I know you would agree with me with this. But off-field performance directly affects on-field performance. If you are not performing well off the field, doesn't matter if it's office-wise, doesn't matter if it's performance-wise, fitness-wise, players-wise. There's a lot of things happening in the background. If you have poor off-field performance, you have poor on-field performance. One directly affects the other. So in this case, the Swans are performing financially well, facility-wise, and actual technology that they've got, they're performing quite poorly compared to the competition. Actually, they're performing basically in 18th place. And I think they're playing as if they honestly believe they belong, or at least they're playing like they should be around that position on the ladder. Carlton struggled for a long time. They've been improving things. Essendon has been improving things. Hawthorn's been improving things. North Melbourne, a few years back, got whole new facilities, and they just rocketed up the ladder on it. They were able to get better players, retain players. Sydney's just struggling with this. I think the off-field performance has really affected the on-field performance, and it's not going to change for the next 2 and a bit years until they finally get a new stadium for all the co-tenants. So, I think this situation's boned them.
I absolutely agree with what you're talking about there, and I think you can extrapolate that into pretty much any career path as well. I know in my line of work, if the facilities are garbage and the training's garbage, well, then your performance is pretty garbage as well. So it doesn't just come down to do your job properly on the day.
What kind of football?
The way you train is the way you fight.
But what kind of football drill can you possibly do running up and down stairs? You can't play kick to kick in the stairway. What are you going to do? Take speckies over bloody seats and break your arms and legs? It's just.
We might try and get that footage of Heaney doing that drill in the stairwell with the medicine ball and just. I understand the point of the drill, but the fact that he had to go into a stairwell to find enough room to do it probably speaks.
It speaks volumes,
how cramped the facilities are there, yeah.
And I know the Swans facilities have been criticised in the past, certainly as being pretty far behind the national standards. So The new facilities that are being built, they can't come soon enough. And I think if you look at it holistically, that is going to have a pretty big impact on the squad's performance. And it also makes you wonder about the injury situation as well. Because, well, Rowan on Facebook says Dane Rampy might like that training method. Yeah, well, honestly, you never know what kind of training methods that guy likes. He's a pretty interesting character. But as I was saying,
he's obviously a hero at growing mustaches.
Growing mustaches, exactly. You've got Jake Lloyd with his still atrocious mustache. He needs to do Movember. Yeah, Linda, you're right. It does build resilience. But the other thing is, like, if you look at the injury management, the Swans medical team has been trying to think of the word here, lambasted, not really, but they have been accused of not really knowing their craft. Certainly in the past, when it comes to management of like your Kieran Jacks, your Dan Hannabrys, your Parkers, your Kennedys, your Franklins and whatnot, it also comes back to facilities, how much technology they have to be able to probably properly diagnose, treat and manage these players. And we've had Neil Cordy come out in the past and say the facilities are a joke. They're like worse than the new teams. These are the sort of things I think that really hamper the club. So, in case you're wondering, if you're listening, ACL 4 to 6 weeks. Is that for Callan Ward? That was Rowan. So Callan Ward hurt his knee today, unfortunately. So normally on our SwansCast, we're quite positive and upbeat. We try not to look too deep into the club issues, but I think today we need to. So we'll go on. We'll talk a bit about Thursday. We're not going to be on this for very long. It's not going to be a long cast. Like, we want to max this out at like 30 minutes if possible. But Josh, Thursday night, first 45 minutes, work rate was there, all the effort was there, the execution was pretty poor, but we really dominated and we probably should have been up by about 40 points at that point.
Yeah, I think we should have gone into halftime with a comfortable 5-goal lead.
Oh, sorry, just clarifying what Rowan said. He didn't say ACL 4 to 6 weeks, he's saying that's what our medical staff would diagnose at the moment, ACL 4 to 6 weeks. I think that's pretty poignant when you look at the fact that Sam Reid was diagnosed with a quad injury for 8 to 10 weeks and he didn't play that season. And then Lewis Malikan's 3-week hamstring ended up being twice torn on both legs and out for the season. And Sam Naismith isn't even expected back until after the bye. So we're looking like round 15, 16. And McVeigh, as the latest report from Charlie Gardner, he said, hopefully McVeigh will actually play again this year. So that's kind of like the running joke of where like the medical situation is at the moment. It's frustrating, Josh.
It is frustrating. It seems to take a long time to turn Swans players around at the moment, to get them back. And often when they do come back, they're not doing very well.
Well, that's because they train in stairs.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what they do as far as rehabilitation stuff goes for those kind of soft tissue injuries. But we seem to do it a lot harder than clubs like, say, Hawthorn at the moment.
Yep.
Who are widely known within the industry of having excellent sports medicine and medical care and rehabilitation. And I think you've just got to look at the number of players they've taken whose careers were thought to be over, and they're back on the park contributing. Like Burgoyne was supposed to go absolutely nowhere when he came to Hawthorn. He arrived on crutches, and he's a 3-time premiership winner now. Tom Scully's back on the park for them.
Yeah, already.
Jaeger O'Meara.
Yep.
Jaeger O'Meara, whose career was supposedly over. So there are. I won't say that there's bad arrangements, but some are clearly functioning better than others. And I think industry-wise, if you read the media, industry-wise, that we're probably not near the top of that pack.
Oh no, we're easily at the bottom. If you consider, and talking on Hawthorn, I mean, we don't want to turn this into like the Hawks blog or anything, but Tom Mitchell, any other club, ruled out for a year. There's actually some level of expectation that he will actually be right at the end of the season to get playing again. That's how much work he's doing. That's how much faith the Hawks have in their recovery system. And look, there has been talk that he could actually be ready to play right at the end of the season before the finals. So it's pretty amazing what they've been able to do. And then you look at us.
if they could get into the top 8 and bring him in with 2 or 3 weeks to go before finals, that would be amazing for them.
Yeah.
As far as club management goes and playing list. But I think it just illustrates the difference between where we're at and where some of the other clubs are at the moment. And again, it all comes down to facilities.
Yeah.
And I think this is a really important point that you've brought up, because with facilities, if you've got good facilities, you attract good staff and you retain good staff.
Yeah.
And if you don't have good facilities, you don't attract good staff. And when you do, you can't retain them. And that's not a football thing. That's in pretty much every walk in life. The surgeons like to work in the good hospitals, not the bad ones, you know. The radiologist likes to work with all the latest technology. So it's not... None of this is new, and none of it's football specific.
And look, you're speaking from a certain medical background, being a MICA paramedic.
Yeah, so like in I guess in my line of work, to some extent, job portability is not that easy for us. But to some extent, you know what the other ambulance services around the country offer in terms of skill base and equipment and drugs you get to use and that sort of stuff. So it does affect your decision making about where you do and don't work.
Yeah. Look, I think we've spent a bit of time on the facilities and what's actually happening off the field. Last one from Ashley. She's put in a bit of a joke. She said, "Our medicos decide that it's a great decision to play players injured until they're broken." Cough, Dan Hanbury, 100%. And we talked about that a little bit just before as well. But I know we kind of got a bit sidetracked. We were starting to talk about the match again. But I think we need to dedicate the next 10 minutes before we wrap up to just the match itself. So, Josh, things got off to a pretty good start. Melbourne kicked the first 2 goals. Bruce a bit of a fluky from the ruck. And I can't remember. I think it was Petrarca, a long one from 50. And then we kicked, I think, 5 of the next 6 goals. Opened up a 22-point lead. And we looked... I wouldn't say home and hose, but we looked like we were kind of walking our way to victory. Callum Sinclair, who was probably had a bit of soreness early in the game, started getting absolutely destroyed in the ruck.
Yeah. Do you think he copped a corky during that? So
I reckon he copped it.
Up a couple times. He copped a corky. He didn't
early in the first quarter.
Any of his jump left. Yeah. He lost his jump. But, I mean, we expected that Sinkers was going to get annihilated once they listed Bruce to play as well. So no surprises there. What was surprising to me was the fact that we had no answers for them in the midfield. So watching Gawn just smash the ball forward by 10 metres was like watching Darren Jolly in that 2005 prelim against St Kilda. You know, and our mids would just run onto the ball and shark it. Well, I mean, they were able to run on the ball this week, and we had no answers to stop them at all.
Yeah, and things changed in the second half. I was very, very frustrated in that third quarter. You could just see it happening. We're watching it, and it was a bit of a train wreck. Basically, the players that come out after halftime, they've squandered a 22-point lead, which should have been about 40 plus. They've squandered 22 shots on goal. Only 18 of them, I believe, ended up being scoring shots. There was a bunch out on the full, and there was 2 that dropped short. They've just stopped running at halftime. The Melbourne players have put time into Isaac Heaney, Florent as well. Those 2 players had 31 disposals and 7 clearances between them at halftime. After halftime, they had very little impact. Then Sinclair's just getting destroyed in the ruck. No changes were made, and for all intents and purposes, our senior players just completely and utterly dropped the ball. George Hewitt, not a good game.
It was a Sydney Swans patented third quarter fade out, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, it really was. Jake Lloyd, he finished, I think, with 33 disposals. I would say only a handful of those were any good. Sure, disposal efficiency was high number of disposals. It's great if you're doing, your fantasy teams or your super coach or something like that, because he did finish quite high. But the thing that really got, my griddle was the fact that Justin McInerney came in for his very first game. And the players refused to give him the ball. They just didn't trust him. He didn't get the ball at all. And the 2 times he got handball receives were hospital handballs, and he got absolutely decapitated when he got them. It was in the third and the fourth quarter. Credit for him for going in, and he laid 2 pretty big tackles. So, credit to him for playing. Disappointing way to debut, but I just thought the the play from the Swans in the second half was disgraceful, and I thought it was like extremely selfish. I can't recall more selfish play from the Swans than I saw on Thursday night.
And it's interesting you say that, because if there's an interview with Isaac Heaney a couple of days, it might have been the day after the win against the Blues, and he gets asked in that interview what have the Swans talked about to try and turn this around, because we looked like a competent football team last week during that game. And in that interview, he actually says that one of the things they've talked about amongst the players and at the club is to stop playing selfish football. So it's something that's actually on their radar at the moment, and clearly it came back again this week. Just on McInerney, I know there's a lot of stuff out there about whether he should or should not have been selected, and whether Rowbottom should have been the one who got a run. And he did look like a kid. He looked like the new kid with a big case of stage fright. But he also got burned a little bit by his team as well. And there's a couple of instances where you can see him moving across a half-back line or upper wing, and he's free and he's waving his arms, and he gets burned.
Yeah.
He gets burned for the ball gets kicked long into a contest. So it wasn't that McInerney was always in a bad spot, or he just coughed up the ball when he got it. He didn't even receive it when he probably should have, and was more than capable of doing it. So
yeah.
I'd hope to actually run him again this week, because that was a terrible way to debut him. And bringing a kid in like that and having him absolutely flogged around and then taking him straight back out of the team can't be good for his development. So
yeah, the old Reed, throw him into the back line and then throw him into the ruck. But then, I mean, that's great, make those changes. But the problem was, Melbourne took numbers out of their forward line and went 2 extra at the contest. And that is one of the reasons why they absolutely obliterated us in the second half. They put their numbers at the contest. We didn't have the numbers there.
We took our tools and put them down back to try and pick off the ball. So when we'd stop an incursion into our back 50, we then had no way to get it out of there, which is why, we seemed to be unable to get past half back. And when we did go into our forward line, it went to nobody. It wasn't stellar.
No.
Like, it wasn't a good game.
It was very stagnant as well.
No, that's right. And then, of course, the fourth quarter comes around, and there's that, that 10 minutes of it was really sloppy, scrappy play, but you kind of sense that the team's gone, we really got to get this back on track. But it didn't end up getting back on track. And
yeah. I mean, there was that one.
A couple of junk time goals.
There was that one sequence of play that was actually pretty exciting, and it was like, well, that's what we played in the first half. Why did it take like 2 more quarters of just pure shite? Basically, the best way to say it. It was just not good football. Why did it take 2 quarters of just really not good, not appealing, very congested and sloppy football to go back to that attacking style, which the Swans have played pretty well in the past? I don't know why. It wasn't
all bad though. There were a couple of good points in the game.
Yeah, there was. Yeah. Unfortunately, they were almost all in the first half.
No, that's true. Well, that's true. And I guess what I should say is it was a couple of individual performances which were pleasing to watch.
Yes.
So one is the rise of Harry Cunningham.
Yes, definitely.
Harry Cunningham's stats this year are actually quite elite and are far above his career average.
Yes.
He's playing some good football. And for all the guys out there who really, really rate disposal by foot efficiency,
he was
Harry's
awesome.
actually going at 85% for the season.
Yep.
Off an average of 22 possessions, so he's doing all right. The other one was at Oflo, had a good game.
Yep.
The Ollie Florent that we know started to show again. So there were a few things in there that were good to see, but overall, as a collective, it wasn't a good look.
No, and look, just on Harry Cunningham, this is his game. He had 25 disposals at 76%. He had 22 pressure acts, 575 metres gained, 8 marks, 10 tackles, 8 rebound 50s, 4 inside 50s. That is insanely good. Right, it's just a shame that it was in a losing effort, really, because we did turn that 22-point lead into a 22-point loss, which was almost inconceivable, really. That's a 7-goal turnaround.
Yeah, and probably the other thing we should talk about too was the number of scoring shots we had after half-time, because you had a pretty damning statistic on that last night.
Yeah, we had basically none. We only had a handful. I think we had maybe, let's see, we had
5 or 7.
I think it was like seven shots at goals after half time, and Franklin had 2 that dropped short.
Yeah, and I think we had 3-4, and
Yep.
3 goals, 4 out of that. Franklin had 2 which dropped short. He still looked like he's missing 10 to 15 metres penetration off his left foot, for my mind.
Yep.
And then there were some horrible dropped uncontested marks in 50 as well.
Yeah.
That should have resulted in shots on goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, some of the other players, I think we need to talk about. Florent had probably his best game that he's had for us. I thought he was terrific. Dawson showed a bit. I liked.
Yes,
Rampy tried hard all game, but he was getting to a point where he wasn't able to do much with it. Certainly butcher it. Franklin, I thought he was okay, but then that last quarter he was gassed. But then on review, I was a bit like, well, he was trying to do it all himself. I thought his play was very, very selfish.
Yeah, and I thought that too. But in reflection, I think he had that moment where he thought,
I've got to do it.
Put this team on my back and carry them. And that probably you've actually got to be a selfish player to do that. I think.
Yeah.
Pick up a team and carry them like that. And I guess if he had got us over the line, we would have thought he was a legend. But it's only because that we didn't get over the line that he probably looks a little bit bullish. But I was pretty happy with what he did. And more importantly, he actually looked like he's got some of his fitness back as well.
He did. Yeah.
Game, but he moved well up until 3/4 time,
Yeah.
which was good to see.
Another one that we're positive on, we both agreed, was Aaliyah. He had 18 disposals, 9 of them intercept possessions, which is pretty bloody impressive. 7 marks, 2 contested. I thought he beat Bruce, despite giving away quite a lot of height and weight. I thought he did pretty good job on him. He only conceded 2 goals for the night, which was really impressive. I think it's time to get into some of the bad.
Haven't we done enough of that?
No, I didn't want to do this in the podcast on tomorrow night.
Just one more thing about Ali before we get into the bad and the ugly. Is that I think Ali cops a bit of flack for his kicking style. I think he's indecisive with what he's doing. I just think he's built like a gazelle and he's got this little sort of chip shot thing.
Yeah.
Towards the back end of the game, he had a couple of instances where he took the game on and he brought the ball out of defence by hand, but then he had nowhere to go to, so he had to opt for these short little kicks to someone so they could take a mark and slow up the game and get some people ahead of the ball. Ali cops a lot of flack for that, but he's got no other option. He's got nowhere to go. There's no one on the open side of the ground for him.
Well, if no one's moving, there's no target. And they didn't want to go to one-on-ones. They wanted to just maintain possession.
Yeah, so I thought Ali's game was pretty good. It wasn't his best by a long shot, but he was solid.
Yeah.
He was solid.
So, Jackson Thurlow's come in for a bit of criticism. I think unfairly. Yeah, he didn't have a great game. But, look, we talked about him just a little bit before. He hasn't really played much in the last two and a bit years. I think he's doing okay, all things considered. He's certainly better than the options and the reserves. And, if we're talking about options and reserves, there's not many and they're not very good. Ben Ronk still looks short of fitness, a long way short of fitness. Sam Reid couldn't catch a cold. And even if he could catch a cold, he couldn't kick the side of a barn from a metre away.
He's a real almost player, isn't he?
That wasn't even an almost game.
He almost kicks the goal.
That wasn't an almost game. That was just typical Sam Reid. Gets into a position, drops it. Takes a mark when he has no right to take it, and then just drops the absolute sodas. George Hewitt, his run of form has been really, really bad. And this is from a player who finished 5th in the Bob Skilton medal. I don't know what to make of him. He was everywhere again on the field, forward, back, midfield, and had 0 impact. I think he had 6 in the first quarter and 4 for the next 3 quarters. That's how little impact he had.
I'm not sure why we had him tagging Brayshaw when we were still getting demolished anyway.
Yep.
But anyway.
Sinclair had his worst game for us by some margin. AFL player ratings actually gave him a 0 score. I don't think they give anyone negative score, but they gave him a 0 score. That's basically how bad he was. He was right at the bottom of that tree. So that's on Twitter if you want to have a look at it. Look, we dominated most of the stats, except they had 6 more inside 50s. They had 1 more free kick. They destroyed us in hit-outs by 60. 7 more clearances. And this was the frustrating thing. The third quarter alone, they had +7 clearances, plus 24 contested possessions. That's just mind-boggling as well. And they got us in inside 50s.
And that was purely lack of effort.
It was.
Don't worry about all the other metrics that you can measure, but if there's zero effort, you can't win it. And that discrepancy in contested possession just shows how off the game we were. Completely non-competitive in the scrimmage.
Now, we'll talk about some more of that tomorrow on the usual SwansCast episode. So I think we'll wrap it up, but I think we'll put a few comments each from us about where the direction is heading and what the expectations are for the season. So to give a bit of overview, a bit of context, we talked quite regularly in the preseason about the expectations of the Swans for this year and probably the next couple of years. The one thing I'm disappointed with the club in regards to this is that they actually haven't put any real effort into sort of clarifying where the club is at, despite the fact that the club supporters really understand when you look at the demographic and the makeup of the team and the squad itself and the age and experience. Most people would look at it and go, okay, we're probably not competing for the flag. We're not really competing for the top 4. The top 8's going to be a bit of an ask. We're probably going to be in that thereabout also ran kind of group, that 8 to 12. And I know, Josh, certainly I said before the season, I think we're going to be doing well to make 8th, but I put us in the 8th to 12th category.
I think we both did. And I think we both said, well, at least I certainly said that we could potentially go as high as 4th, but that would require a few things. And one would be Reid and Mills would have to come back. Mills would have to have his breakout year, and Reid would have to come back just competent and ready to go. That was a big ask on its own. Heaney would need his breakout year, and we would have to essentially do the year injury-free, and none of that's eventuated at all.
No, I mean, you look at Lewis Malik, and he's come back in and he's dropped after 2 games. Ryan Clark's dropped after 2 games. And
just with Melican, we're talking about changes in coaching staff. Like, where does a guy like Melican learn his craft from?
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. Reece Shaw left, and I think Reece Shaw was probably one of the reasons why he was able to develop so well. It's just, it's a weird situation at the club. We're certainly in a transition period. I wish the club would come out and at least acknowledge it, because they acknowledge the fact that there's more debutants over the last sort of 3-4 years in almost all the competition. I think we've actually debuted more players than Brisbane have over the same period. I think over the last 3 years, 19 players. Right, and this is first game players that were debuted. It's insane just how much the club has changed and the squad's changed. But yeah, look, I think we're going to be doing extraordinarily well to get close to the finals this year, Josh.
Yeah, look, I don't look. I mean, I said last year at the end of season review that I didn't actually care where we finished up the next year, because I didn't think that, looking at the retirements and people who are up on the trade table and likely delistments, that we were a contender this year anyway. But what I would like to see is when we get around 23 and our guys actually have a few weeks extra rest of relaxation and pre-season put into them, because they're not going to play finals. I just want to get around 23 and go, do you know what? We had a good year of development.
Yeah, exactly.
And I've still got high hopes for that. There's still 19 weeks until around 23. But that's basically my only hope for the year, is just a good year of development so we can get our young kids and bring them in and get them blooded. And that way, maybe not next year, but the year after, I would hope that by 21, 22, we are genuine contenders again. Yeah, I think that's probably a realistic way of looking at it. What I'm looking forward to by the end of this season is I'd like to actually see Sam Naismith fit again. He's not a spring chicken. He's actually like 26, 27 years old, and he's only played about 20 or 30 games. So he's quite inexperienced for his age. I would like to see us probably get some of the other recruits that we got through the draft into the team. So that's James Rowbottom. Probably give James Rose a shot. I don't think he's really had a proper shot, and the other way he's going to improve is if he actually gets a chance. And I think with the fixture that's coming up, right, we've got Richmond, we've got Essendon, we've got GWS, we've got Brisbane, we've got Geelong, we've got Collingwood, and we've got the Eagles. Right, we're 1-3. I'm not seeing too many more wins
leading up to the bye with the way that we're playing. If we were playing great football, yeah, we'd be competitive, but the football we've been playing this first month is... I don't think we're getting too many wins out of those games.
No, but there are, and I've got to keep coming back to this myself, that there are quarters and there are periods where we are and have shown that we are a capable team, though.
Yes.
And one day, and the hope is that one day we will have the experienced personnel and the energy and the go and the dedication to take those moments and quarters and string them into 4-quarter games for weeks on end, and then we'll come out and obliterate everyone, and then it'll be the year we win our next flag. But
yes,
there is hope. We have hope. The hope is never gone. It is still there.
Yeah, it is. Look, I think that's enough for today's episode. There will be the SwansCast episode tomorrow night. We'll be recording that offline and putting it up onto Wooshka and Facebook and YouTube as we normally do. Thank you, everyone, for all your comments. It's been great having some feedback from the crowd and also talking about the Swans. We do love the Swans. We want them to win. But I think this year it's going to be an interesting and challenging year. And I think there's just too much happening, Josh, off the field, certainly off the field, for the Swans to really find some success on the field this year. So, yeah, that is what it is.
Yep, is what it is. I'm up for the bumpy ride, mate.
Yep, I'm up for the bumpy ride. I got my memberships. I'm happy. Even if I don't go to the games up in Sydney because I'm based in Melbourne, I'm still happy. I'll still put my money in. I just want to see the club progress and move forward and upwards. That's all I want to see.
Yep, yeah, I'm with you. Onwards and upwards.
All right, everyone. Until tomorrow, thank you for joining us. It has been a pleasure having you on. Go Swans.
Go Swannies.